The first thing I heard was the siren. Not the distant, mournful wail of an ambulance on the main road, but the sharp, frantic, close kind. The kind that makes the little hairs on your arms stand up. The kind that means something is happening on your street. I muted the conference call I was on, some quarterly review where a vice president was using the word synergy like it was a life raft, and peered out the window of my home office. There it was. An ambulance, lights strobing, parked awkwardly in front of the ornate wrought-iron gates of Maple Creek Estates. It wasn't moving. My blood went from lukewarm to ice water in about 3 seconds. Gated communities are great for keeping out door-to-door salesmen, but they're a nightmare for anything that requires urgent access. Still, there are safeguards, protocols. There's an emergency access code, a universal key given to first responders for this exact reason. The paramedics weren't using it. One was out of the driver's side, frantically jabbing at the keypad. The other was on the radio, his posture screaming panic. They were stuck. Then I saw it. Mr. Henderson's front door, 3 houses down, was wide open. Mr. Henderson, the 80-year-old widower who still mowed his own lawn and left a bag of tomatoes from his garden on my porch every August. "Shit," I muttered, killing the conference call entirely. My laptop snapped shut with a definitive click. I was out my front door and sprinting down the sidewalk before I even had a plan. My Nike slapped against the perfectly edged concrete, a rhythmic counterpoint to the useless blare of the siren. "The code's not working," the paramedic yelled as I approached, sweat beading on his forehead. "The emergency line just keeps ringing." My eyes landed on the keypad, and that's when I saw it. Taped to the stainless steel faceplate, laminated against the humid afternoon air, was a freshly printed sign. "Attention! For enhanced community security, all temporary and emergency access codes have been deactivated. For all non-resident entry, please contact HOA President Brenda McIntyre for remote access. Office hours 9 a.m. to 4 p.m., Monfry." I stared at the sign. It was in that cloying, self-important font she used for everything, a bastardized version of Comic Sans that screamed, "I own a label maker and I'm not afraid to use it." My brain struggled to process the sheer, weaponized stupidity. Deactivating the paramedic code? For security? Against whom? A rogue gang of EMTs planning a drive-by defibrillation? "You have got to be kidding me," I breathed. "We've got a possible massive cardiac event down there, man," the paramedic said, his voice strained. "We don't have time for this HOA crap." "Her office hours are until 4, I said, pointing at the sign with a trembling finger. "It's 2:32. Is she even answering?" "Goes straight to a voicemail about a scheduled power walk," he shot back, his face a mask of disbelief. "Right. Brenda. The woman who ruled our perfectly manicured slice of suburban hell with an iron fist and a 3-ring binder full of violations. My mind, which spends 8 hours a day identifying security flaws in corporate networks, suddenly kicked into gear. Brenda had insisted on this upgraded system a few months back. The Vesuvius 5000 integrated entry solution. It sounded impressive, but I'd looked it up. It was a consumer-grade piece of junk with a fancy touchscreen, designed to impress people who think more buttons equals more security. And consumer-grade junk almost always has a back door. "Stand back," I said, a weird calm settling over me. "I built my dog a treat dispenser that I can activate from Twitter. I think I can handle this." The paramedic just stared at me. I pulled my wallet out, found my thinnest credit card, and slid it into the seam of the keypad's faceplate. With a little jiggle, the plastic cover popped off, revealing the guts of the machine and a small set of maintenance pins. This was the part the installers, and certainly Brenda, never thought about. I didn't have the tools, but I had a key ring. The small key to my old file cabinet was roughly the right size. I jammed it between 2 of the pins, shorting the system and forcing a hard reboot. The screen went black, then flickered back to life, displaying the Vesuvius logo. For about 5 seconds, it would be in its default maintenance mode, waiting for an admin command before loading the user-facing software. My fingers flew across the keypad. *73738#, the default factory admin access code. I'd found it in a PDF of the manual online in about 30 seconds the week it was installed. A menu popped up. 1 you weren't supposed to see. 1. User MGMT. 2. System logs. 3. Network CFG. I hit 1. A list appeared. Resident codes, guest codes, emergency. I selected emergency. The screen showed a single entry. Paramedic. Next to it, in stark red letters, status, disabled. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. I hit the button to re-enable it. Then, for good measure, I navigated to the guest codes and added a new one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pathetic, but easy to yell in a crisis. Try the original code now, I said to the paramedic. He punched it in. There was a satisfying beep, a mechanical whir, and the great iron gates of Maple Creek Estates slid open. The whole thing took maybe 3 minutes. Holy crap, the paramedic said, already sprinting back to the ambulance. Thanks, man, seriously. The ambulance screamed past me, leaving a wake of diesel fumes and palpable relief. I stood there, heart pounding, the plastic faceplate of the keypad still in my hand. I watched them pull up to Mr. Henderson's house, watched them rush inside with their kits and a stretcher. I was just starting to breathe again when I heard the second most feared sound in our neighborhood. The clipped, furious sound of Brenda McIntyre's orthopedic sneakers power-walking towards me. Just what in the Sam Hill do you think you're doing, Mark? She stood there, hands on her hips, clad in her usual uniform of pastel pink sweatsuit and a visor that probably had its own FCC license. Her face, usually a mask of smug satisfaction, was pinched with fury. I was letting the ambulance in, I said, my voice dangerously level. You tampered with HOA property. I saw you on the security camera. You tore it apart, she screeched, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at the keypad in my hand. I popped a plastic cover off, Brenda. A cover you used to hide a sign that was preventing first responders from saving a man's life. A man who might be dying right now, 50 yards away from us. There are procedures, she shot back, completely ignoring the dying man part. The proper procedure is to call me, and I would have provided access. The emergency code was a security liability. We had an incident just last week where a Gopher Grub driver used it to deliver a pizza without checking in at the call box. I just stared at her, my brain short-circuiting. The sheer, breathtaking disconnect from reality was something to behold. It was like arguing with a brick wall, if the brick wall was obsessed with bylaws and gluten-free recipes. A pizza, I repeated slowly. You prioritized a potential pizza-related security breach over a heart attack. Security is paramount, she sniffed, puffing out her chest. And you have now compromised the entire system with your hacking. This is a serious violation. You will be hearing from the HOA's legal counsel. This will be going in your permanent file. She snatched the faceplate from my hand, snapped it back onto the keypad with a violent crack, and stormed off toward her house, which was, of course, the beige-est of all the beige houses. I stood there alone in the sudden silence, broken only by the distant, muffled sounds of the paramedics at work. My adrenaline was gone, replaced by a cold, simmering fury. A permanent file? Legal counsel? All because I fixed a problem she created. That was the moment I decided I was done. Done playing by the rules of her petty little fiefdom. Brenda McIntyre had just declared war. She just didn't realize who she'd declared it on. I walked back into my house, the silence feeling heavy and strange. My dog, a goofy golden retriever named Buster, nuzzled my hand, sensing my agitation. I absently scratched his ears and went straight to the kitchen cabinet where I keep the good stuff. The 12-year-old single malt I save for catastrophic code failures and holidays. This felt like both. Pouring a generous 2 fingers, I leaned against the counter and took a long sip. The whiskey burned a pleasant trail down, but it didn't quench the fire in my gut. I thought about Mr. Henderson. I thought about the sheer, unmitigated gall of Brenda. Living in Maple Creek Estates had always been a trade-off. You got a nice, quiet street, manicured lawns you didn't have to mow yourself, and a community pool that was surprisingly clean. The price was submitting to a 60-page book of covenants, conditions, and restrictions that dictated everything from the color of your front door, must be chosen from the approved Earth and Harmony palette, to the maximum allowable height of a garden gnome, 8 inches. Presiding over this suburban paradise was Brenda McIntyre, HOA president for life, or at least for the last 6 years since her husband had left her for his dental hygienist. Brenda had channeled all her subsequent energy into the HOA. It was her life's work, her magnum opus of micromanagement. My first run-in with her was 2 weeks after I moved in. I received a laminated violation notice, delivered via a clothespin to my mailbox flag, for leaving my recycling bin at the curb for 47 minutes past the 9 a.m. post-pickup deadline. I remember reading it and laughing, assuming it was a joke from a neighbor. It wasn't. It came with a $15 fine, which she informed me would double every day it went unpaid. Since then, it had been a cold war fought through passive-aggressive newsletter blurbs and anonymous violation reports. I was the guy who worked from home, a mysterious tech type in a neighborhood of dentists and sales managers. I kept to myself. I paid my dues on time, but I refused to participate in the annual chili cook-off or the patriotic pet parade, which made me a permanent person of interest in Brenda's eyes. But this was different. This wasn't about gnomes or garbage cans. She had put a man's life in danger to enforce a rule that was, in itself, insane. The whiskey glass felt cool in my hand. My mind, now fueled by righteous indignation and good scotch, started to work. She wanted to talk about security. Fine, let's talk about security. I downed the rest of my drink, set the glass in the sink with a determined clink, and walked back into my office. Buster followed, his tail giving a questioning thump-thump against the doorframe. "All right, buddy," I said, cracking my knuckles as I sat down at my desk. "Let's go to war." The promised letter arrived 3 days later. Not in the mail, but hand-delivered by Brenda's one and only crony, a weaselly retired actuary named Gary who served as the HOA's sergeant-at-arms. He practically threw the certified mail envelope at my door before scurrying away as if I had a contagious disease. The letter itself was a masterpiece of legal-ish jargon, clearly cobbled together from a template Brenda found on the internet. It was printed on thick, cream-colored cardstock, the official letterhead of the Maple Creek Estates Homeowners Association, embossed at the top. RE, cease and desist, and notice of fine, violation CCR Article 4, Section 3B, unauthorized modification of common area property. It went on for 2 pages, accusing me of maliciously and willfully circumventing community security protocols, exposing the community to untold and significant threats, and performing an act of vandalism upon the Vesuvius 5000 integrated entry solution. The fine was, as threatened, $500. I read it twice, once with disbelief and a second time with a growing sense of glee. She'd actually done it. She had documented her own incompetence and mailed it to me. I spent the next 4 hours crafting my response. It was, if I do say so myself, my Sistine Chapel of sarcastic, legally fortified correspondence. I didn't just write a letter, I compiled a dossier. First, I wrote the cover letter, I addressed it to the HOA Board of Directors, care of Brenda McIntyre. I started by formally acknowledging receipt of their creative piece of correspondence. I then systematically dismantled their claims. For unauthorized modification, I attached a sworn affidavit, which I had a notary friend at the bank sign for me, stating that my actions consisted of a temporary and non-destructive diagnostic procedure to restore critical, legally mandated functionality. For exposing the community to untold threats, I did a little digging. I found the original purchase order for the Vesuvius 5000 in the public HOA meeting, minutes online. I then did a full threat assessment on the system. I found and documented 3 major unpatched security vulnerabilities, including a flaw that would allow someone with basic Wi-Fi sniffing hardware to clone resident key fobs from 50 feet away. I included this report under a section titled On the Subject of Actual Security versus Security Theater. Finally, I addressed the city ordinance. I attached a copy of Municipal Code 11-4A, which explicitly required all gated communities to provide unobstructed, code-based access for all registered emergency service vehicles. I highlighted the relevant passage in yellow. Below it, I embedded a screenshot of the gate system's log file, which I had acquired. It showed the exact timestamp of Brenda disabling the paramedic code, and the exact timestamp of me re-enabling it. The cherry on top was the invoice. I drafted a professional-looking invoice from Markham IT Consulting and Solutions, which was just me, to the Maple Creek HOA. Item: Emergency IT Consultation Services. After-hours emergency rate. Description: Restoration of critical infrastructure to comply with municipal ordinances during a life-threatening medical event. Time billed, 3 minutes. Rate, $10,000 per hour. Minimum 3-minute billing increment. Total, $500. I concluded my letter with, I consider this invoice for services rendered as payment in full for the frivolous fine you have attempted to levy. We are now square. Do not contact me on this matter again. However, I would be happy to provide a quote for a comprehensive security audit of all HOA systems, as it appears you are in dire need of one. I printed the entire 12-page packet on the nicest paper I had, slid it into a crisp manila envelope, and CC'd not only the entire HOA board, but also the city fire marshal, my city council representative, and, just for kicks, the local news channel's consumer watchdog reporter. I walked it down the street and placed it directly in Brenda's mailbox myself. The fallout was immediate and beautiful. The neighborhood, which usually communicated through polite waves and passive-aggressive Facebook posts, became a hotbed of gossip. I was getting my mail the next day when Gary, Brenda's lapdog, shuffled past, giving me a look that could curdle milk. "You know," he said, not breaking his stride, "there are rules for a reason. Some people just think they're above them." "You're right, Gary," I called after him. "Preventing paramedics from saving lives should definitely be against the rules." He just scurried faster. But then, the good stuff started. Mrs. Jackson from next door, a young mom with 2 kids, brought over a plate of still warm chocolate chip cookies. "I just wanted to say thank you," she whispered, glancing around as if expecting Brenda's spies to be hiding in the azaleas. "My father died of a heart attack 2 years ago. Every second counts. What you did was heroic." The biggest moment came 2 days later. My doorbell rang, and it was a woman I didn't recognize. She looked exhausted, but her smile was genuine. "You're Mark, right? I'm Sandra, Jim Henderson's daughter." "Oh my God," I said, my stomach lurching. "Is he—" "He's okay," she said, and I felt a wave of relief so powerful I almost sagged against the doorframe. "He's going to be okay. He had a major blockage. They had to put in 2 stents. The doctors said, They said if the paramedics had been even 5 minutes later, he wouldn't have made it." Her eyes filled with tears. "The EMTs told me what happened at the gate. They told me what you did. I don't know how I can ever thank you." "You don't have to," I said, genuinely moved. "I'm just glad he's all right. He's a good man." "He is," she said, wiping her eye. "Thank you, really?" Her heartfelt thanks was a shield. It was a suit of armor. Whatever Brenda threw at me now, it wouldn't matter. I had cookies and the validation that I'd helped save a man's life. Let her bring on the lawyers. Brenda, it turned out, didn't bring lawyers. She brought cops. It was a Saturday morning. I was in the middle of my weekend ritual. Coffee, sweatpants, and meticulously debugging a piece of code I'd written the day before. Buster was asleep on my feet. It was peaceful. Then, the doorbell rang with an insistent, official-sounding chime. I opened the door to find 2 police officers standing on my porch. One was older, with a mustache that had seen things, and a weary look in his eyes that said he'd rather be anywhere else. The other was younger, fitter, with a glint of amusement he was trying very hard to suppress. "Markham?" the older one, whose name tag read Miller, asked. "That's me," I said, trying to look like a law-abiding citizen and not a guy who'd been awake since 3 a.m. wrestling with a Python script. "We received a call about a security issue," Miller said, consulting his notepad. "A report of someone hacking into the community's, security mainframe?" He looked up from his notes, and his eyes plainly said, "Please tell me this is a prank." Before I could answer, a voice shrill with indignation cut across the morning air from the lawn across the street. "That's him, officers! That's the hacker!" It was Brenda, standing by her prize-winning rose bushes, pointing at me as if I'd just stolen the Declaration of Independence. Gary stood beside her, nodding vigorously. I sighed and leaned against the doorframe. First of all, mainframe is a bit of an exaggeration. It's a glorified garage door opener with a cell phone chip. And second, did Brenda tell you I'm also a secret agent from Spectre, here to steal her prize-winning chili recipe? The younger cop, Davis, coughed to cover a laugh. Miller shot him a look. "Sir, the complainant alleges that you breached the security of the front gate," Miller said, his voice a monotone of practiced patience. "I did," I said cheerfully. "And I'd do it again. I re-enabled the paramedic access code that she illegally disabled. An ambulance was stuck at the gate trying to get to Mr. Henderson, who was having a heart attack. You can ask the paramedics. You can check the city ordinance. Or you can just ask Sandra Henderson if she's happy her dad is alive. This is a civil matter, officers. And with all due respect, a colossal waste of your time and taxpayer money." I gestured towards Brenda. "She's mad because I sent her a bill for my services." Miller stared at me for a long moment, then looked over at Brenda, who was now flapping her hands in frustration. He looked back at me. A flicker of understanding crossed his face. This wasn't his first HOA rodeo. "So you didn't damage any property?" he asked. "Nope. Just popped a plastic cover off and on. The system is functioning exactly as the manufacturer and the law intended." I paused. "Can I offer you guys a water or something? It's getting hot out here." "That won't be necessary, sir," Miller said, closing his notebook. He walked to the edge of my porch and addressed Brenda across the street. "Ma'am, this is a civil issue for your homeowners association. We can't arrest a man for helping an ambulance. This is not a criminal matter. Please do not call 911 unless there is an actual emergency." Brenda's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "But he compromised our security." "Ma'am, have a good day," Miller said with an air of finality. He tipped his hat to me. "Sir." They walked back to their cruiser, Davis visibly shaking with suppressed laughter. As they drove away, I gave Brenda a friendly little wave. The look of pure, impotent rage on her face was more satisfying than a perfectly compiled piece of code. I thought that would be the end of it. I had won. I had public opinion, legal precedent, and Mr. Henderson's recovery on my side. I had underestimated the depths of Brenda's pettiness. If she couldn't beat me with rules or cops, she'd beat me with the ultimate HOA weapon, a massive, unnecessary, and wildly expensive capital improvement project. An email went out to the entire community a week later. Subject: urgent. Emergency HOA budget meeting regarding critical security upgrades. It detailed how a recent security breach by a resident had revealed significant vulnerabilities in our gate system. Therefore, Brenda had taken it upon herself to solicit a proposal to replace the entire thing. The meeting was mandatory for anyone who wanted to vote. The night of the meeting, the community center buzzed with a tense energy. Brenda stood at the podium, looking smug. Next to her was a man I could only describe as a human oil slick. His hair was gelled into a precarious helmet, his suit was a size too small, and his tie was a shade of electric blue that hurt the eyes. "And now," Brenda announced grandly, "I'd like to introduce Chad from SecureMax Solutions, who will walk us through the proposal for a new state-of-the-art system." Chad grabbed the microphone, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. For the next 20 minutes, he assaulted us with a PowerPoint presentation filled with buzzwords and stock photos of smiling families. He talked about synergistic perimeter defense, blockchain-encrypted RFID fobs, and a next-gen AI threat detection matrix. It was all nonsense, designed to sound impressive and justify the obscene number he finally clicked to on the last slide. $40,000. A collective gasp went through the room. That would be a special assessment of nearly $500 per household. "This system," Chad said, puffing out his chest, "is virtually unhackable." My hand shot up. Brenda ignored me. I kept it up. Finally, Mrs. Jackson pointed at me. "Brenda, Mark has a question." Brenda sighed dramatically. "Yes, Mark?" "Yeah, Chad," I said, standing up. "I have a couple of questions. First, can you explain the technical implementation of your blockchain encryption? Are you writing each entry and exit to a distributed ledger? And if so, what's your block time and how are you handling consensus on a localized network?" Chad blinked. His smile flickered. "Well, it's, proprietary. It's a very advanced algorithm." "Right," I said. "Second, your AI threat detection matrix. Is that just a fancy term for a motion-activated camera that sends a push notification?" Chad started to sweat. "It's more complex than that." "Is it?" I pressed. Because the SecureMax 9000 series, which this appears to be a rebranded version of, is running on a Linux kernel from 2012 with 3 known critical remote execution vulnerabilities that the manufacturer has never patched. It's not unhackable. I could probably get admin access to it from my living room with a laptop and a Pringles can antenna. So my last question is this system truly worth $40,000 of our money? The room was dead silent. Chad looked at Brenda for help, but she was just staring daggers at me. I had done my homework. After Brenda's email, I'd called Sal. Sal was the antithesis of Chad. He was a 50-something, semi-retired electrical contractor who had done some work for me when I first moved in. He showed up in a beat-to-hell Ford F-150 with more rust than paint, a coffee stain on his t-shirt, and an expression that suggested he'd seen it all and wasn't impressed by any of it. I explained the situation. He took one look at the Vesuvius 5000. "A Vesuvius?" he'd grunted, kicking the control box lightly. "Jesus, they sell these things at Home Depot next to the bug zappers. It's crap. Who's the genius who picked this?" "Our HOA president," I said. "And now she wants to replace it with something from a company called SecureMax." Sal let out a bark of a laugh. "SecureMax! Even bigger crap, just in a shinier box. They prey on HOAs. Sell them $5 grand worth of parts for $40 grand and call it security." So what would you do? I asked. For this place? He looked around. You need a simple, commercial-grade system. Steel box, magnetic lock, simple keypad, and RFID reader. No fancy touchscreen, no Wi-Fi, none of that garbage that breaks if a bird farts on it. Parts and labor? Maybe 8-10 grand, tops, and it'll last 20 years. I had Sal write up a formal proposal. Detailed, itemized, no buzzwords, just parts, labor hours, and a guarantee. I had it in my bag. Back in the meeting, Chad was stammering. Brenda stepped in. Thank you, Chad. Obviously, Mark has his own opinions, but we need a professional solution. I agree, I said, pulling a stack of papers from my bag, which is why I got a second opinion. I walked to the front of the room and started handing out copies of Sal's proposal. This is from a licensed local contractor with 30 years of experience. It's for a commercial-grade system. No blockchain, no AI. Just hardened steel and reliable electronics. The total cost, including installation and a 5-year warranty, is $9,200. The room erupted in murmurs. People were looking at the two numbers, the $40,000 and the $9,200, and you could see the light bulbs going on over their heads. This is ridiculous, Brenda sputtered. We can't just consider a quote from your handyman. He's a licensed electrical contractor, Brenda, I said calmly. And we absolutely can. It's called due diligence, something that's supposed to happen before you try to ram a $40,000 special assessment down our throats. I had them. I could feel the tide of the room turning. The spell of Brenda's authority was broken. People were no longer afraid of a violation notice. They were angry about their money. But I wasn't done. I had one more card to play. The ace up my sleeve. But you know, I said, addressing the room again, my voice dripping with faux curiosity. I'm still stuck on why this was all necessary in the first place. Brenda said this was all prompted by a serious security breach involving the old emergency code. She mentioned a Gopher Grub driver. It just felt odd. So, being the hacker that I am, I did a little digging. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the projector Chad had been using. A screenshot of the gate log from that fateful day appeared on the screen. It showed the access log from the now infamous paramedic code. There was indeed one use of the emergency code on the morning of the incident, about 3 hours before Mr. Henderson's heart attack, I explained. It was used by a delivery driver. I zoomed in on the entry. A driver from a service called Gopher Grub. I looked over at Brenda. Her face was turning a pale, blotchy white. Now, why would a Gopher Grub driver be using the emergency code? It's a mystery. But then I remembered our neighborhood has a very active community Facebook page where residents often share grievances. I swiped on my phone. A new image appeared on the screen. It was a screenshot of a Facebook post from Brenda McIntyre, posted that same morning. The entire room could read it. Brenda McIntyre is feeling angry. I am absolutely livid. My Gopher Grub driver just left my kale superfood salad on the porch and ran. And they forgot the low-fat vinaigrette. The vinaigrette! It's the whole point of the salad. Worst service ever. I am reporting them to corporate. A stunned silence fell over the room. You could hear a pin drop. People were looking from the screen, to Brenda, and back to the screen. The gears were turning. I let the silence hang for a few delicious seconds before delivering the final blow. So let me just make sure I have the timeline straight, I said, in a calm, deliberate voice. Brenda gets angry because a delivery driver forgot her salad dressing. A few hours later, she unilaterally deactivates the emergency access code that driver used. A few hours after that, an ambulance carrying life-saving equipment for her elderly neighbor is stuck at the gate, unable to get in, because of that decision. I turned to face Brenda directly. Her mouth was opening and closing, but no sound was coming out. "You didn't do this for security, Brenda," I said, my voice low but carrying through the silent room. "You didn't even do it over a pizza. You risked a man's life over a vinaigrette." The room didn't just murmur, it exploded. It was a wave of outrage, disbelief, and derisive laughter. Gary, her one ally, was slowly sliding down in his chair, trying to become invisible. "That's outrageous!" a man in the back yelled. "I can't believe this!" Mrs. Jackson exclaimed. Mr. Henderson's daughter, Sandra, who had come to the meeting, just stood up and stared at Brenda, her face a mask of cold fury. It was a coup, a full-blown suburban coup. Mrs. Jackson was the first to formalize it. She stood on a chair, channeling a revolutionary fervor I never knew she had. "I make a motion to reject the SecureMax proposal in its entirety." "Second," about 30 people yelled at once. "All in favor?" The room was a forest of raised hands. "Opposed?" Brenda and Gary kept their hands firmly down, looking small and defeated. "The motion passes." "And I make another motion," shouted a guy I recognized from the tennis courts. "I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in Brenda McIntyre as HOA president, and to demand her resignation from the board, effective immediately." "Second!" the room roared. The vote was a formality. Brenda didn't even try to fight it. She just stood there, her face a crumpled mess of shock and humiliation. When the motion passed, she grabbed her binder and her oversized purse, and without a word, fled the community center. We voted to approve Sal's proposal on the spot. Then, someone nominated me for interim president. "I respectfully decline," I said, holding up my hands. "Vehemently. My civic duty for the decade has been fulfilled, but I will volunteer to oversee the gate installation to make sure it's done right." That seemed to satisfy them. The meeting broke up, but people lingered, buzzing with the energy of a newly liberated populace. People clapped me on the back. They shook my hand. Sandra Henderson gave me a hug. For the first time since moving in, Maple Creek Estates actually felt like a community. A few weeks later, life had settled into a new, more pleasant normal. Sal and his crew installed the new gate system in a single afternoon. It was a thing of beauty, simple, robust, and utterly boring. There was no touchscreen, just a keypad with big, chunky, backlit buttons and an RFID reader that worked every single time. Sal even gave me the master admin code, just in case the new board gets any bright ideas. Brenda had gone completely underground. Her house was quiet, her blinds were drawn. Rumor had it she was planning to sell. Gary avoided eye contact with everyone. A new, far more reasonable board was elected, led by Mrs. Jackson. The reign of beige-colored terror was over. Mr. Henderson was back home too. He was under strict orders to take it easy, but every morning I'd see him on his porch, reading the paper, and he'd give me a slow, grateful wave. It was better than any paycheck. I was on my own porch one Saturday afternoon, enjoying the peace. Buster was snoozing in a patch of sun. I had a cold beer in my hand and a book I'd been meaning to read for months. It was perfect. This was the quiet life I had moved here for. Then I heard a tentative voice from next door. Mark?" It was Carol, my neighbor from the other side. A nice woman, but notoriously tech-illiterate. "Hey, Carol," I said. She peered over the fence, a worried look on her face. "I am so glad you got rid of Brenda. It's like we can all breathe again. Listen, I know you're busy, but since you're so good with all this tech stuff, my Wi-Fi has been acting really weird all morning. The little light is just blinking. Do you think you could just take a quick look?" I stared into the middle distance, at the perfect, HOA-approved blue sky. I took a long, slow sip of my beer, My quiet life was over, wasn't it? I had deposed the dictator, only to find myself installed as the village's reluctant IT guy. A slow smile spread across my face. It was a different kind of problem. A better kind. I sighed, a sound of pure, contented resignation. "Yeah, Carol," I said, putting my book down. "I'll be right over."